good is Cayne? Well, to answer that question, we must first know what it is. It is a sci-fi horror point-and-click adventure game, which is a slightly mind-bending mix for a few reasons, among which point-and-click games being usually slow-paced, thoughtful, and with a distant third-person or isometric, or a still screen set of perspectives, while horror is best conveyed in first-person or very close behind-the-back third-person perspectives most often.
What did you do to me?
There are very good games that mix and match all sorts of characteristics, though, so let's see how well Cayne manages to hit all the key points needed to provide an effective and enjoyable formula. Good adventuring and puzzles is as key in point-and-click games as is good atmosphere and fear-inducing moments to hit the good horror games mark.
Please?
As a side note, one should also consider this is a free access game, a prequel to Stasis, a full game from the same development team, and so was very likely designed to be a bite-sized entry point to the bigger picture in the sequel. Even though Stasis technically came out before Cayne, it is its sequel. So, at first glance, you will undoubtedly be able to see that the visuals are quite good, detailed, crisp, and manage to convey a credible setting for the unfolding events, even hitting the quite superb mark in some locations. So far, so good. Plus, they are complemented by competent cinematics dotted here and there throughout. This is also a classic of the genre to add flavor and color the imagination as we navigate the endgame world. Unfortunately, that's the only aspect I could find no near-fatal flaws with. A very important part of point-and-click adventures is, well, it's right in the name, the adventure. Here, the very short, simple, linear, but somehow still full of backtracking experience is still lacking in variety and richness. This is likely an effect, a pitfall of the design objective, as far as I can tell. Because this was meant to be a short prologue to the actual game.
This is all because of the baby?
This is probably a compromise on that, so let's be lenient on this particular point.
Pregnant.
However, that feeds into another weakness of the game, the writing. While not terrible, it does fail to elevate the atmosphere or your investment in the characters and universe in any meaningful way as far as my experience with the game went. The logs you will find will paint caricatures of paper-thin people rather than flesh out intriguing figures. And a caricature is never as interesting, at least long-term, as an actual believable person that might interest you at some point during the history of the game. Many of these will leave you agape at how unbelievable their actions were and how they're communicating them to you. And by unbelievable, I mean breaking suspension of disbelief, kicking you out of the in-game world and rendering any other elements meant to create atmosphere ineffective to a degree. If you cannot believe you're in an actual world, there are no real stakes, no fear, no excitement. You're just plodding along, hoping for something better to come along that might be interesting to you. Now granted, the dev team was small and likely didn't have much in the way of resources, but good writing is a big part of building suspense, a brooding and ominous atmosphere in a horror game that is not based on action, jump scares, though they did try to set one of those up at point, and plays on perspective and soundscapes, all the things that you don't really need a super shiny 3D engine and 3D audio and VR and whatnot. With rather more modest means, you could achieve just that. But this actually segues right into another aspect that isn't as strong as one would like. The sound design, the soundscapes. Often there would be background noise that I surmise was meant to be scary or unnerving, but because it bore little to no contextual connection to what you were doing most of the time, it just felt flat. Hearing a distant moan is an effective way to scare the bejesus out of you if it actually leads to something. When it doesn't, and you just hear it repeatedly in the background noise, looping, every few minutes, that moan just falls flat into the meaningless background noise that you will phase out automatically when playing. And, well, that's a shame. Really is a shame. Especially since the voice acting is pretty much on point throughout, which is commendable. It's a weak point in even multi-million-dollar projects in very large studios with, well, multi-million projects just for said voice acting. Some games are just good despite their voice acting. That's not the case here. It certainly adds to the quality of the game. But moving on, so graphics on point. Sounds hit and miss. But what about the adventuring? What about the puzzles? Well, the very core of the design of the game is, again, likely the reason why these are short, simple, and linear mostly. Though, again, some involve boring backtracking, and still manage to hit the too often bane of the point-and-click genre, the illogical solution puzzle, to which there are many more logical solutions with things shown on screen. Which is, again, a shame. Cayne didn't manage to escape a common flaw to 1990s games that most have since skillfully avoided in recent years, in the genre at least. There is even some of that lovely pixel hunting we all love. And by love, I mean hate with a passion. Yes, actual pixel hunting in high-res graphics location stills. Granted, this is connected to second-tier or hidden puzzles you don't actually need to complete to finish the main story, but still, get that pixel hunting out of gaming. Please. It wasn't interesting gameplay 30 years ago, and even less so now, with so many more pixels on screen and many other gameplay options available to reach the exact same goals. Make it so that the character needs to find some special visor to examine locations instead of, you, the player, needing to scour the screen with your mouse pointer. Make it so that secrets are only seen by players after finishing the game once. I mean, and these are just the first thoughts that came to mind while writing this piece. I'm sure an experienced dev team could think of and implement alternative mechanics to pixel hunting on a 1920 by 1080 pixel screen. That's over 2 million pixels, guys! Come on! With that said, the core storyline is interesting. The plot is intriguing, and with better execution in some parts, it could have definitely been a sleeper hit of sorts. If you can weave and bob your way past these flaws, and most certainly enjoy at least sci-fi or horror or sci-fi horror, or point-and-click adventure games in general,
Yeah, it's official.
it'll be worth it
Losing
if it
my mind.
means you'll then move on to play Stasis, which is the stronger sibling of the two.
Yes.
And I guess that would be my take on this game. Play Stasis first if the idea of sci-fi horror point-and-click is appealing to you, and only then if you feel the urge to know a bit more about how things got started in that storyline, play Cayne afterwards. So, in effect, despite it being a prequel, it was developed afterwards, so even the dev team thought, and at least better executed, their ideas in Stasis first, and only made this afterwards as an add-on prequel prologue, bite-sized, enticing little free gameplay, almost like a mod or a tutorial of sorts, perhaps, so that you would buy and play Stasis afterwards. Unfortunately, it might fail at that, so I would advise you do the reverse. Play Stasis, and then this, if you're still interested in the story. So in summation, a competent, if unimpressive effort in many aspects that shows glimpses of what it could have been with perhaps more time, more effort, or talent employed to make it. It might have been a case of not enough people and not enough time, not enough money to put out a top-notch product. Still an enjoyable experience, but just really doesn't break away from the pack of adventure games, and there are so many by now, that you might want to skip it if it doesn't really speak to you, and the more likely game that will speak to you in this universe will be Stasis. And that's all I've got. For this episode, at least.